Hey, what's up, Helldivers? We're back with another video today. We're going to be discussing the Illuminate secondaries and grenades tier list. Just going over in 4-player co-op, which ones I recommend, which ones maybe I don't, and discuss like possible like changes that could be made to them and improvements in the future. All right, let's get back into it. Going all the way to the top, we start with the Warrant. This is a Superstore exclusive pistol. This is a tracking medium pen pistol. I do like it on the Illuminate front. It's probably the front that I like it the most on personally, just because it's really good for taking out watchers. And if you guys don't know, the little hidden trick to Illuminate and making the faction a lot easier is actually just taking out all the watchers. If your team is very good at taking out watchers, you will feel a huge difference in how intense and hard an Illuminate faction, especially on the harder difficulties, is. Because at that point, you're just dealing with random patrols. But if you have a good, reliable weapon for taking out all of these watchers that are coming at you, awesome. Super good. And for that reason, I'm actually going to put it all the way up in A tier. I do think it's not the best weapon for like elevated overseers, or it's not a bad option, but it's not the best option. And Voteless will tank a fair few shots, especially because like it's not exactly hitting weak points when it's tracking towards them, but feels very good against watchers and can be a good weapon for those that are maybe struggling against the elevated overseers. All right, next we have the regular Peacemaker. This one is the first pistol you always start off the game with. They have improved it slowly over time, but I have issues with it. I feel as if the gun it's an old reliable, but I don't particularly like using it. One kind of fun trait of it is that it's actually very silent, and you can also fire it at a ridiculously fast fire rate. I'm kind of blocking it. Let me get my head out of the way. 900 RPM. Which is pretty sick if you have the trigger finger for that, but it's not particularly great. I think it's like a solid sidearm if all you're doing is like using against Voteless, I guess, but you'd kind of want something a little bit more, I think, in your loadout, and maybe something that fills some more gaps in maybe what you want to kill. I do think it is decent at killing an overseer. Just make sure that you're picking a body part, breaking the armor that's attached to it, and then shooting that like black under the armor skin. It'll make a huge difference in how effective you are at killing overseers. A lot of people make that mistake, and then they separate all their damage across the entire body of an overseer, and they're like, these guys don't die, and I don't understand them, and they get mad. But you can kill them a lot faster if you pick a body part. Yeah, C tier. I wouldn't say anything more. The SOCOM Pistol. This is basically more or less just an alternative to the original Peacemaker. It is suppressed, ironically, just like the Peacemaker kind of is. It does a little bit more damage, has a smaller capacity, but more or less on par with it. And for that reason, I'm going to put it right next to it in the C tier. Not doing anything that impressive. It has a smaller magazine, which would actually be kind of a negative against Voteless enemies, at least. So there is that. Not a huge fan of it. It's mostly just for cosmetic if you want to role play as a ODST. All right, next we have the Redeemer, 60 damage, pretty small magazine for how fast that fire is, of 1100 light pen. You can drop a Overseer fairly quickly, but the recoil is quite high, so you'll probably want the recoil resistance armor, and probably still even then throw in a crouch as well to just light up the chest of an Overseer, and can do that fairly effectively. But it's definitely not a weapon I'm like calling home about. It's not crazy. I do think there are many better options. Now, would I rank it over these two? Probably. It's still like a C tier pick in my opinion. I don't think it deserves to be in B tier. Part of me wants to maybe put it a little higher because you can use it in semi-automatic mode. It's got a fairly large magazine in that mode, and with a decent trigger finger, you can kind of outperform these other weapons, but I don't really recommend. Okay, next, going to a fan favorite, the Verdict. This is kind of like your Deagle, I guess, on the secondary front. 125 damage, 10 capacity, slower fire rate, but I think it's like a pretty fair one because most people aren't utilizing the 900 RPM of a semi-automatic pistol. 450 is very manageable to get that maximum fire rate. Medium pen, good damage, decent recoil. Not too much, but decent amount. I think it's like a solid A pick. I think I value it a little bit more than the Warrant personally because I don't have that much trouble aiming on mouse and keyboard. But if you're on console and having a little bit more issue with like elevated overseers or watchers, you'll prefer the Warrant. But I would rather have the upfront damage, like that damage gain of like 50% more damage for the Verdict. It does matter. It does make a difference. But if you're missing 50% of your shots with the Verdict, maybe the Warrant's just better for you. Keep that in mind. Okay, next we go on to the Senator. The Senator is a bit of a niche one because it can do some fun things like one tap a overseer in the head, and it can kill harvesters fairly quickly. Range and making sure you're hitting your shots can be kind of an issue with the Senator because I'm going to be honest, the god-awful reticle, both in first person and in third on the Senator, is very hard to deal with. That giant triangle in your face, when you're trying to be accurate with it, it's blocking like most of like where you would want to aim. It's very difficult at times. Some people don't mind it and they shoot just fine. Personally, it's a big issue for me, but I still think it is a solid pick just for the utility front of if you are very good at one tapping overseers and just like raw damage, you can have it in your back pocket for dealing with harvesters. Just make sure not to get too close to harvesters. They will bully you with their shock attack. Next, going into melee weapons. Melee weapons are challenging. And the reason why I think they're challenging to place is because different people will have different ways of looking at them. Personally, I just see them as like a weapon that I will occasionally use against a voteless enemy if I want to have some fun, and maybe the rest of my loadout is like perfectly fine for dealing with overseers and harvesters and stuff like that. It's a fun choice if I already have all my other bases covered on the Illuminate front. I don't think melee does anything particularly better than any of the sidearms that I just listed. All these sidearms arguably are better at like killing voteless and overseers and stuff like that and put you at much less risk. The stun prod, like it can get some use on like some enemies, but for the most part, it's just for fun. And for that reason, I don't really want to put it any higher than C or D tier because you're not going to be running up to a flesh mob and meleeing it. You just won't be. And you're not going to be trying to out melee an overseer. You could, and it is fun too at times, you know, to challenge yourself and do things like that, but it's not a reliable way to do anything like that on the Illuminate front. The only thing I would say is like fairly reliable is like dealing with voteless, but even then you're actually going to get a fair bit of hit trading on it. I'm going to kind of put all of the melee weapons down in D tier, but just keep that in mind that like depending on the melee weapon that you're using, it has different benefits. So you have the machete that is very good at like large sweepings, but it's like attacks a lot slower. You have the hatchet, which is very good for like single individual targets, but like you melee a lot faster. The baton and the stun lance are good for like not hit trading as much as long as you get the first hit. So like if you find yourself using a lot of like stims while in melee combat, maybe switching to more of the stun related weapons would help a lot. The saber is more or less like an all-arounder. It's kind of like the machete with sweeping attacks, but it's also kind of like the machete where it's like pretty damn good at individual attacks. Do also remember that melee weapons do matter if you're going for weak point hits. Weak point hits matter on like voteless, being able to one tap them very reliably, or even going for overseers. Also, they're all medium pen. I know it says light pen in game, but they're all medium pen. Before someone in the comments is telling me that the machete is the only medium pen weapon, it's not. They're all medium pen. It's just listed incorrectly. Next, going to the Stim pistol. Great utility. I love it. If you have it, someone on your team using it, it's always a great time. It's hard to argue against it. It's just nice to have. It can sometimes be hard hitting your teammates, and I still wish there was some kind of tracking on it, or just like a larger hitbox or less sway, because there is a fair bit of sway on the Stim pistol still. Just making it like perfectly accurate and like no sway would be like really nice. If they're not, I would still love to see like the Warrant like tracking on Helldivers. That would be so good, but maybe one day. Still a very good option for team play, but you don't really need more than one on a team, maybe two, so you can Stim pistol each other. It'd be kind of fun, but yeah, decent. All right, the Bushwhacker. I like the Bushwhacker. On the Illuminate front, it's fun at times to run. It's not amazing because I tend to want to have a little bit more range on the bot front, in my opinion. I feel as if, you know, taking out like overseers and stuff like that, you don't really want to give them like the grace of being that close to them. You can stagger a fair bit of like the forces, including like watchers and overseers and stuff like that, but you're not really going to be messing up the flesh mobs too much, like as far as like stagger, but it is decent damage because at the end of the day, the Bushwhacker does 405 damage per shot, shoots 3 times. That's good damage per second. Like you could just pump that into a flesh mob real quick. So it's one of the better weapons for just all out, like something's gotten really close to me and I want this thing farther away from me or just taken care of. I appreciate it a lot more on the bug front than on the Illuminate front personally, but maybe there's something to be said for like at least pushing back a overseer that's getting too close to you. If you really value that, you might appreciate it more than just B tier. Okay, next, the absolute fan favorite of the Talon Talon. I think I'll be putting the Talon all the way in S tier just because it's kind of just like the go-to all-around sidearm. Medium pen, unlimited ammo, as long as you don't like spam fire it. Just a really good option. Luna's making some biscuits down here. Good choice. Hard to argue against it, really. There's a fair bit of like bloom and sway on the weapon, but you can easily get around that. Being able to like double tap overseers in the head, really nice. Good damage. Great for watchers. You might want something that's a little bit more ad clear oriented. So that's maybe something where like the verdict might be a better choice for you. But I just love the Talon so much. It's hard to compete against it. It really is. I might be overvaluing it a little bit. It's definitely closer to like S- A+, but solid option. Crisper. Crisper is like good A tier weapon. If you need something in your loadout that is good against flesh mobs, arguably a really good option. They're quite weak against fire damage, and in general, like just being able to light the ground on fire, just dealing with a lot of mobbing, quite good. You're not really dealing with overseers unless they get quite close to you, but you know, you can lay that kind of trap of fire down, then pull back. It works well in those situations. But definitely for flush mobs, I would kind of recommend, you know, giving it a try. Always a solid pick. Grenade launcher, solid S tier. Great versus overseers, great versus flush mobs, great versus voteless. Obviously ammo is more concern, but just as they beam onto the ground from their ship, they're all clumped up. It's a great opportunity to grenade pistol them. You will get a ton of damage in those scenarios, and it's a good way to just like finish off flush mobs if they are bothering you. So would recommend. Dagger is a bit of a tough one. I want to put it so badly in A tier, but I've been having issues with just like lighting enemies on fire. It used to be way more reliable at lighting, like especially overseers on fire, and I valued it a lot more. But now it's having more trouble versus overseers. It's still pretty reliable at lighting flesh mobs on fire, but overseers not as much, and even like voteless not as much. So it's kind of slipping a little bit. I still think it's like quite good, and I'm not going to put it quite down in B tier, but it's okay. It's okay at lighting things on fire. I wish it was better, because it was better once upon a time. And remember, 2 instances of fire absolutely destroy overseers. It's really good at that. So here's hoping in the future, a bunch of our status effects will just be better and easier to light things on fire. Still think the Ultimatum is an ultimate sidearm. Just so much utility, so much ability to like kill like flesh mobs, can kill harvesters, your objectives, so you don't have to actually take out the shield. Very, very, very useful to bring onto the Illumina front. Hard to argue against it, in my opinion. Obviously, it doesn't have much ammo, only 2 shots, but there's so much individual yellow bricks running around. As long as you just keep it reloaded, you'll pretty much always have 1 shot in your back pocket for like those hordes of flesh mobs, or just like dealing with the occasional like harvester. Just make sure to take out the shield first. A fun one that honestly doesn't always get as enough attention, somewhere in the A tier, is the Loyalist. The Loyalist is like your Purifire's like little brother. It doesn't always perform that great as a sidearm, because typically you use a sidearm as something you pull out in an emergency if it doesn't have a lot of utility. That being said, you can kind of use it as like a backup weapon. If you're someone who likes using, you know, Scorcher or Purifier, or just like some weapon that doesn't have that much ammo economy, let's say, the Loyalist can be easily a backup explosive weapon for dealing with flesh mobs, or overseers are quite weak to explosive damage as well. You can use it against them. Groups of voteless. Just make sure you charge it. It makes a big difference. If you don't charge it, it'll feel very underwhelming just tap firing it. But when you charge it up, it hits fairly hard. It's not as hard as a Purifier. It's not as hard as an Epoch, obviously, but it honestly can do some serious work against the Illuminate forces, especially, like I said before, when they start clumping up, explosive weapons like this can do quite a bit of damage. Looking at the tier list, just before we move on to the grenade, I feel like there's a lot in the A tier, but I think it's kind of fair. I don't know. I don't think any of our sidearms in the C tier need to go down. And yeah, there's a lot here in the A tier, but I think they all deserve it for some reason. Either it's like a lot of like high tier utility, obviously with the healing, or just like good utility as far as fire damage, explosive damage, solid all around, medium pen, the tracking, especially versus watchers, that can be really good. Just lighting things on fire very reliably at range versus the Crisper not having as much range. I might be being too kind to the Talon overall, but I think, you know, people are onto something when they say they absolutely love the Talon. It's just a overall very good option if you need medium pen. Obviously, don't be spam firing it. You don't want to overheat it because that overheat is just extremely inconvenient because it just takes a long time for you to reload it. But, you know, if someone's very good at like tap firing all these different enemies one at a time, like I think it can do a lot of work. So yeah, that is a secondary tier list. I'm now going to swap over to the grenade. All right. And now we're back with the Illuminate grenade tier list. Starting off with our newest arrival is the pineapple. Arguably the most disappointing thing. It's not even arguable. It is the most disappointing thing in the Dust Devils Warbond. Everything else was extremely useful in some form or fashion, but the pineapple, not so much. It is not, in fact, a light pen. It does even state there that it is pen 3, which is medium pen, but it's quite disappointing in just how it deals its damage. I don't enjoy how much damage it's doing. It is better versus the Illuminate forces, but let's be honest, everything is just slightly better against like voteless and stuff like that. It can do some respectable damage at times because it is the 300 damage and then it multiplies after it's split, but it just doesn't have enough oomph. You only get 3 of them. And the way it separates and just not enough projectiles is there's a lot of dead zones in how it deals its damage. So it's unreliable when you throw it at something. Potentially, it could do a lot of damage to something like a flesh mob or like a group of enemies, but the reliability of just taking something like the Dynamite is just so much better. You throw it, it blows up, it does that damage in that area reliably every single time, but there's just not enough fragmentation of the pineapple to do that because it does shoot out little fragments and it obviously has submunitions that are like the cluster effect. I actually didn't realize it was a fragmentation grenade. I know it said that, but I didn't actually see the fragments for a while. There's like just not enough of them. It's not like the Eruptor that shoots out quite a few or even the frag grenade that shoots out quite a few. So you notice it. You really just don't notice it with the pineapple. I don't know. They kept it very low on how many fragments shoot out, and they kept it very low on how many submunitions there are. So it's just like in general, it feels disappointing. So for that reason, I think I'm going to put it all the way down in C tier. It can do something against the Illuminate forces, especially when everything's like clumped together, but other grenades are just going to perform far better. Next, going to Dynamite. This is one that I've always hoped that would get some like a balance pass of just doing more destruction damage, especially for those Bile Titan layers. If a Dynamite could like blow up a Bile Titan layer, if you had to turn on the higher fuse or something like that, would love that. I still always felt like the outer radius and like the damage over radius, it was a little disappointing. I always wanted it to be better. I am warming up to it a little bit over time, but it's still not my favorite. I do think it has more of a use on this front just because you do not need that pen 4 on the Illumina front like you do on like the other fronts to be able to do damage to like different objectives or to do damage to like a charger or something like that, or to actually get through the medium pen of like Devastators and stuff like that. Like the Dynamite does do like a fairly good job on the Illumina front, and having that explosive damage, I will concede it is fairly effective. But that being said, I would probably overall just prefer to bring the high explosive. I think the extra reliability of like that extra damage and doing that extra like penetration damage can be quite useful in certain scenarios. Also, the fuse time can be quite cumbersome. 5 seconds of fuse time can be hard to throw at a flesh mob. You definitely have to start doing some like math on like, okay, how far is he gonna run in that amount of time? Where do I have to place this? It's pretty easy when they're like standing still or like they've been stunned or something like that, but it can be difficult to anticipate where enemies are going to be in 5 seconds. Whereas the 3.5 second fuse time of the high explosive is a little bit easier to use in my opinion. So I will value the high explosive a little bit higher than that of the Dynamite. Okay, next going to fragmentation. I want to love these so bad, but they literally don't have enough destruction force to blow up a Tesla tower. Like, I don't even understand why. The fact that you can't use them to destroy a Tesla tower, it just doesn't make sense to me. As far as I understand, basically every other one doesn't have that problem outside of like the arc nade or like the stun nade, but like it's an explosive grenade. Why doesn't it do it? It can blow up like a bug hole, but it can't blow up a Tesla tower. It doesn't make any sense to me. Even if you place it perfectly underneath, doesn't make any sense. If it was able to do that, it would probably be like B tier, maybe low A, just because you get 5 of them, and the fragmentation is fairly useful. I find the grenade damage to be pretty respectable for dealing with voteless, not so much for dealing with overseers and stuff like that. You just need to throw more than one most of the time in order to kill them, which is a bit disappointing. All right, next we have the incendiary grenades. I think the incendiary grenades are pretty damn good, but because incendiary damage is kind of weird right now. I'm going to put it like middle of the road. I'm going to assume in the next big patch in the middle of October, they will address hopefully the incendiary damage and just like status effects in general. It's not bad and it does work a fair bit at a time, but every once in a while you're going to get like Voteless just walk right through your fire, not taking any damage. And you're like, what the hell? And for that reason, it's like middle B. I don't think it's quite C tier because fire damage does work a fair bit against especially like flesh mobs and your Voteless, but it's just not always working. So I think it's like conceding down to B tier. Okay, Arc Grenade. This one's like a personal favorite of mine. I really like using this, but I definitely need to make sure I bring something to blow up Tesla towers and objectives. But personally, I really like it. Because it doesn't have as much utility as other grenades, it's going to be conceding down to B tier, but it does like A tier like mobbing and damage to enemies because it like the initial explosion and then it like arcs out to all these enemies and it can stun a lot of enemies. Just remember that it's very bad at kill tracking. It doesn't always kill track, or I don't even think it kill tracks at all when it kills something. So you might think it's a lot worse than it actually is. If you're someone that only looks at the metric of how many kills did it just get me with the yellow skull icon, I believe it's still bugged. So just keep that in mind. I don't think it even matters if you're host or not host. It's just kind of always been like that, but use it. I think it's pretty good. All right. Impact nades. Impact nades have been falling down the tier list over time. I think they're like middle of the road. You only get 4 of them. The damage is pretty middling at this point, but they are instantaneous. So if you have a group of enemies that appear right in front of you because of the Illuminate dropship, pretty good for that. Pretty good. Hard to argue against that, but I would probably just rather the double damage because that will be a more reliable factor for dealing with like flesh mobs and overseers and stuff like that, especially with damage fall off being a thing. Next, going to incendiary impact, about the same as the normal incendiary grenade. You're sacrificing some upfront explosive damage, but you're gaining the immediacy of that fire. Just make sure that it's not happening, like it's not exploding too high above the ground, because if it explodes too high above the ground, it will not light the ground on fire. Keep that in mind, but it's about the same. It's just a different way of delivering the same package, which is the floor being on fire. Good, but same issue. Incendiary damage is weird. Side effects are weird. Stun grenades have received a little bit of tuning as far as like duration and things of that nature, but I still feel as if stun grenades need more. And what I mean by more is like, I shouldn't just only have 4 of them. I honestly think I should be holding 6 of them and they should last longer. I should be able to wear like the electric resistant armor and it gives me like EMS stun immunity, for instance. There needs to be more so I can like build in and want to use stun grenades. Because at the moment, why would I not just use the amazing gas grenades? Because they can destroy Tesla towers, they can stun lock things, they do damage, you get 4 of them. Why would I want to use the stun grenades? I don't think the stun grenades are absolute terrible, because at least, you know, for people having trouble like dealing with like elevated overseers, you can throw them at elevated overseers. They are stuck in place and you can kill them fairly effectively, but gas grenades are just better. Doesn't make stun grenades terrible, but they're heavily overshadowed by gas grenades. They're just so good. Okay, next, going into the secret grenades. This one, you'll see a lot of TikToks and like YouTube shorts of like people getting a 120 kill streak. It's bugged. It's just when you kill an enemy with this grenade, it'll count like for 5x. So if there's like a group of like 20 Voteless in front of you, you could easily get like a kill counter of 100. So if you're someone who just likes gawking at your teammates and being like, you guys don't kill enough enemies, I'm way better than you, and you want to gaslight them, this is the ultimate gaslighting your teammates loadout. Bring this Hellbomb backpack, a guard dog, and the de-escalator, and you have like the ultimate loadout for like just gaslighting your teammates. Basically everything I just listed multiplies kills a lot of the time, so it'll give you the impression that it's better than it actually is. I don't like the secret grenades. You can ping a Tesla tower, it blows up too early and it doesn't blow up the Tesla tower. I'm pretty sure it has enough destruction force to do that, but it literally can't do it. And it doesn't one-shot elevated overseers, which sucks. It should absolutely one-shot elevated overseers and honestly should prioritize them. This is something we've been talking on stream about. Maybe it should prioritize like elevated enemies more often, but I don't know. It's a liability because you can easily kill your teammates as well. It could track onto an enemy that you weren't anticipating. I don't like it. I would rather use the pineapple personally. Any stratagem that's having trouble killing Tesla towers and or just doesn't have that much killing ability, I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm going to put it down there. It just seems weird. I would rather have like stun grenades in my inventory just to at least stun the enemies personally. All right, smoke grenades down all the way. Because remember, this is a tier list that is judging based on 4-player co-op. We are not talking about solo play, I do think there's a place for solo play and avoiding combat and like, you know, smoking off a lane so you can like do an objective easier and stuff like that. But the utility is quite low. Obviously, it's not doing any damage. If you want something like this and you want have like a bunch of enemies shooting at you, running after you, gas grenade. It's just better. Or stun grenade. It's just better. I don't know. Not a huge fan. More smoke. I'm going to say it as always. Give me more smoke grenades with a larger plume. Maybe I would value it more. All right. Next, we go into thermites. Just the king of utility. And honestly, a pretty good option for dealing with flesh mobs. It's a little slow at dealing with flesh mobs, but it does a ton of damage to them. And it can often like be your answer. It might not always one-shot them, but maybe bring a coyote or another fairly good explosive weapon for dealing with them. And you can combo it quite well. Also, it can one-shot the on-ground UFOs without needing to take the shield off, which is cool. Just throw it on top. I find that tends to be the best answer for them. Also, it can be pretty good against harvesters, especially now that they've changed them for anti-tank weapons to be good against them. Throw it at the main fuselage, and it should be 1-2 depending on where it lands. It could be a bit finicky because they're quite resistant to explosive damage, even if it has a high pen. They're a bit weird like that. But I would put like thermites like I think like A+ S tier. It kind of depends on what you want for them. I do think the gas grenades are better overall, but it's not like a bad option whatsoever for just like general, like even mobbing. You can throw them in like a group of enemies, and remember it does damage over time when it's on the ground, so it can be kind of like an area denial, but it's just a very small area denial. I'm gonna put an S tier for now, but we might change where it is. Okay, going to the Force of Law Urchin. Cool in theory. It can kind of bully flesh mobs and bully harvesters, but that's about it. You could throw it into like a small like alleyway on Illuminate missions and just kind of stun everything that walks into that. Cool, but once again, it falls into the same problem as like the cutting edges stun, where maybe you're just better off bringing gas or just killing them with a grenade, or just using like the arc grenade and just like outright killing that enemy. I think I'm going to put the Urchin as far as like utilities somewhere in C tier. I'm honestly feeling like stun grenade deserves to be also in C tier, you know, thinking about it more. Maybe giving the Urchin a bit more because it can lock down and bully a flesh mob. So if you just want to bully those fuckers, you can do that. Next, going into the throwing knife, honestly, just a meme. You do get quite a few, and you can kind of just spam throw them at overseers or spam throw them at vote lists, but it's just like an off-centered throw. It's not exactly where your crosshair is. The damage isn't that high. Honestly, I would love to see this get affected by peak physique. So it does 500 damage on a throwing knife. That'd be kind of cool. Maybe a bit too video gamey, not grounded enough for Arrowhead, but that'd be kind of neat. But that being said, it's like D tier for democracy. Don't really recommend. Okay, and lastly, we have the Pyrotechnic. This one should be S tier. It should, but more recently, because of the changes to incendiary damage and just how finicky it is, I think it's been demoted to A tier. I am really hoping that they make those changes so it goes back up to S tier. If let's say next month they improve the status effect buildup and it's like super reliable all of a sudden, I think it's an easy S tier. Having 6 grenades, you get 3 on a resupply. It's like great damage versus flesh mobs, because remember, it's not only doing incendiary damage, like it's lighting the enemy on fire, but when it's spinning around, it's doing impact damage, like projectile damage, and then it explodes, doing a little bit more damage, and then it leaves the ground on fire. So it's got so much going for it. You can actually very reliably throw 2 of these underneath a harvester, and as long as the harvester isn't like dancing around like it sometimes does, you can actually kill a harvester in 2 of these under their feet. Very reliable. Way too much fun when you're dealing with that. It's not the most reliable at dealing with UFOs though. You'll very often throw them into the entranceway of like the on-ground UFO objective, and it may, like when it's spinning up, fly out of the UFO, which is a bit annoying. So I won't always use it for that reason, and maybe I'll bring like the grenade pistol just to deal with the UFOs and then just have these as like for mobbing, but really good option. It needs to be more reliable. Okay, is there anything that I feel like needs to change? I do like the fact that I brought the stun grenades down. I still feel like the arc grenade is kind of slept on. Utility is a bit lower because obviously it's not dealing with your like Tesla towers and stuff like that, but I do think the killing ability is quite nice. High explosive and dynamite being up here I think is warranted. A lot of people just moved away from the high explosive, never went back, but they have made a lot of positive changes to it, especially like giving it all that extra damage. I do think it is quite nice for like one-shotting like overseers and doing a lot of damage to like flesh mobs and stuff like that. It's quite nice. Dynamite I still would love to see it get more love because I want it to be like more destruction force. Like, I think it'd just be really cool if it was like more anti like building and just like bigger explosion, especially if like, let's say you turned up the fuse and it became like a bigger explosion or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like spitballing way too crazy, but I think that'd be really cool if it was like dependent on the fuse time. Like the longer the fuse, the bigger the explosion. Kind of cool, maybe. I don't know. All right. I think I'm pretty happy with this. I think I'm being a bit harsh on the frag grenades. I do think they're like a little bit better than that, but just like the ability not to kill a Tesla tower just doesn't feel good at all, man. It just doesn't. I really hope that they look into that. I think the frag grenade should absolutely be able to kill a Tesla tower. Okay, we'll call the tier list there. If you guys enjoyed what you saw here, if you have any questions, feel free to ask down below or come on by the stream. Do remember Maplewood_TV either on Twitch or on YouTube. I now have a second YouTube channel just dedicated just to the stream. We were just noticing that when I was streaming on this main channel, my videos were getting affected with like how much people were like clicking on them or noticing them. So we now have a dedicated streaming channel for that. I'll be live all the time on that. Anytime I'm live on Twitch. If you guys are interested, I'm live like basically every morning other than Mondays playing HG2 and then a selection of other games when they come out. Usually halfway through the stream, we swap. Please consider leaving a like, subscribing on both this channel and the alternative. Discord link down below. If you want to get in contact with me, feel free to check out any of the socials. Much love, YouTube. Peace out.